This is another episode of Rewriting Her Story, and today's conversation is about rewriting voting. We've been having conversations all month about the importance of voting and restoration of rights, and we could not have this conversation without speaking to the Director of Women's Operations at the State of Maine Department of Corrections, Miss Amanda Wolford. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So just so that everyone knows who you are, outside of being the director of women's operations for the last 9 years, during this time, you have been a champion for incarcerated women in the state of Maine, constantly pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo. She's passionate about increasing programming and opportunities for women to reduce the likelihood that they will return to prison once released. And so just to give a little bit more about your background, I know that I was told to keep it short, but I always love when women have great accolades. I think we should always lift those up. And so your career started in case management with as a criminal justice student at Northeastern University in Boston. During this time, you began to understand the importance of individualized care plans and that the pathways in and out of incarceration are much different for men than they are for women. You then went on to earn your master's in criminal justice with a concentration in strategic management from Boston University. Incredible. And then I see that you are actually in probation too, huh? You know, what's great about that is that you have, gotten the education through academia, but then you also began to work in these systems in order to understand more about the system and then clearly see the difference between men and women and what are the needs. And so, again, I thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with me, because this month, as we know, how incredibly important it is to vote, why we are voting in this presidential election, and it is critical that we do because of the state of the country right now. But really, local elections is where we have the greatest impact, right? Even from voting sheriffs in, voting district attorneys in. And so we were always talking about making sure you're voting down your ballot. And so what's great is Maine is one of 2 states, along with Vermont, that actually people who are incarcerated have their right. They're eligible to vote regardless of their conviction.
Correct.
Regardless. The state constitutions guarantee voting rights for all citizens, interpreted to include incarcerated people from the earliest days of statehood. And so I think that is incredible. Can you give us a little more information about why only Vermont and Maine? Like, in your opinion, of course.
Honestly, I don't know why it's stayed there. I mean, we probably were we were very small states when this country started, right? So very low numbers of incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably just an overlooked population when they started disenfranchising people.
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, it's just kind of stuck. Perhaps the general public doesn't think it's a big enough number to really sway an election. So there hasn't been a lot of pushback. But I think it's great. It's really a powerful thing for especially the women. I see being part of these elections and being part of the conversation that lead up to these elections. You hit it on the head when we're talking about sheriffs and district attorneys and local level policy decisions that really affect them, and educating them on that and giving them a voice and a choice, I think is so empowering and so uplifting. And it really goes back to the self-esteem that we're trying to build up right from the ground up. And voting in women's rights is something that we're all really passionate about here. So we're grateful to be part of that process with them.
It's incredible. And do you think, how do most people who are incarcerated know that they can still vote? And if they haven't before, what's the process to get registered?
So the process to get registered, there's just a typical registration that would come in. We have a notary that, obviously, if you or I went to go register to vote at our town hall, we would bring proof of a bill or something, right? So them not having that, we have a notarization process here. And they register in the town that they previously lived in before they became incarcerated. So that's how they would vote. They would vote on local issues that pertain to those areas. And that's where that vote would get counted. So the county, the town that they previously came from, whether it's Portland or Augusta or Bangor, that is where they're registered to vote. So we help them with all those pieces of paperwork. We have a lot of outside, I mean, obviously before COVID, this was, a much bigger thing. We have folks in the community that volunteer their time to come in to not only help them in the process, but to also help us educate on different topics. Do a lot of voter education about what bills are being presented and what they need to know, in a very, nonpartisan way, just hear the facts. This is the facts. And then the women go, there's several groups within our prison and then our reentry center that they put together information for the population. And I sent along to Kate an example of one of the bulletin boards that they put together. This was like 2 years ago. Andrea James from the National Council has been in a few times just to talk about policies and laws that have come up in other states and how we can replicate those. Massachusetts was one of the examples that she gave with the Primary Caretaker Act. So she came and explained what that meant and what that looked like. So if women wanted to get involved here on a local level, we have a few representatives that come in, are real champions for women issues. Again, I mean, even as much as having a conversation of how a bill becomes a bill. Some, if you didn't hear the Schoolhouse Rock story, just a bill up on Capitol Hill, let us tell you about that. So, there's a lot of conversations, and these are normalized conversations. This is not just like, oh, we're having the president's coming up, the presidential election's coming up, let's go sit down and talk about this. This is ongoing conversations because policies are constantly changing, local laws are constantly changing, and how can they have a voice in that? So it's really normalizing.
That is so powerful, and so happy that, other formerly incarcerated women are coming in to actually even talk about the policies that they're leading in their states, and really giving some of the sisters who are presently inside the opportunity to post-release look at some of the legislation that they may want to propose, or even potentially run for public office once they understand more about the civic process and what it is as it relates to their rights. And so, I heard you mention about COVID and things being impacted. So can you give some more specific examples on how that has impacted the voting process? I know volunteers not coming in is one thing, but is it has it always been absentee ballots, or is this the same thing? Is there actually a polling site inside of the prison?
Yeah, so no, it really hasn't impacted anything in terms of casting their vote. It's always been an absentee situation. So they're voting just like I'm voting this year, right? We're doing the absentee route, and that's always how that's been. So that's why it's really important for us as staff, but also as these agencies from the community. League of Women Voters is another agency that's typically coming to help out, just to make sure the paperwork is in and in on time, so that vote is cast, and it's cast in a timely manner, and to make sure that it does count. It's not just for nothing.
So how can people help increase voter turnout amongst the incarcerated population in the community in Maine? So your family members, say, for example, right? I'm a woman, I'm incarcerated in Maine. I understand the civic process, who's running for office, but what about my family, right? They may have been registered, but they don't know. Do you all open up? I'm thinking because of COVID, or do you have video visits or anything like that? Are visits still even going on? Are you doing events where family can come in to learn the process just like that because, again, of COVID?
Right. So video visits, absolutely. We have non-contact visits. We have texting. All those things are still happening. So in terms of them educating their family on these topics, absolutely. Sometimes at the beginning of this process this year, one of my caseworkers overheard a woman, they were talking about well, who are you going to vote for? Well, who are you going to vote for? And the woman said, well, I'm going to call my boyfriend. And the whole room was you could hear the brakes go on. It's you're going to do what? And so there was a lot of talk after that. It's no, what do you think is important? What's important to you, not to your boyfriend? And so just really changing that mindset. And then just the population in here taking on the life of its own of no, girl, that's your vote. Why are you calling a man to tell you how to vote? A man who's on the outside, it's going to affect you too very differently. Whether the president is, red or blue this year, it will affect you in a very different way. Yeah. So and it's really about the voter education. It really comes down to, you can vote all day long, but if you're not educated on what you're voting for, it's all for nothing. So we really take a lot of time and a lot of energy is put into what are you voting for? When you check that box, what does that mean? And how does that affect you? And how does that affect your family and your kids? And maybe your kids' kids, because these things kind of stick around, they have a trickle down effect, right? So really, really having all the information before you check that box is what's really important.
Now, do the local elected officials, do they actually have an opportunity to, or have they ever come in to talk to the women to say, listen, I am, presently running for office, campaigning? Do they ever do that inside the prisons?
Not so much campaigning, but we definitely have representatives that take an interest in this population, and they make efforts to get in here. And not even during election years, just, one of the representatives I spoke about before, she came in, I'll give a shout out to Rachel Talbot Ross. She came in just to teach the women how a bill becomes a bill and go over the step-by-step process. And, again, she was one of the champions for a lot of the women's policies that she's been writing, particularly for incarcerated women. So she wanted their voice part of these policies that she's writing. It's very important to her that they're heard, and she's really made them a part of the process. So we're grateful for that. And but yeah, it's not, the doors aren't closed to any of that. If you want to come in and share or stuff like that, there's really no campaigning particularly that goes on, especially during COVID. But they've got a lot of time, right? So there's a lot of newspaper reading, there's a lot of news watching, there's a lot of conversations being had all around politics. Like I said, red, blue, green, all of it is on the table.
So do they have an opportunity to watch like the debate nights? Do women there, is it like a TV room? That's what it was where I was. We didn't have individual TVs. So do women get to have a TV in their cell, or is it a TV room? And do they, is it automatic we're watching debate night, or do they have to schedule to watch debate night?
So, well, both. So no, they don't have to schedule it. We do have TVs in our day areas, but they also have individual ones as well. So if you're not interested in what, one TV's got on, you can go and watch another one. So
got it. Okay, so that's cool. So it seems like it's very accessible. It seems like women are being educated on, like you said, everything, just the information, like who's running, why they're running, what they're running for or on. You're engaging others to come inside the prison to have these conversations around voter education, just the civic process, what a bill is, how to write a bill, why you need to vote on X, Y bills. The visits still happening, at least the video visits, and you are having visits, maybe not contact, but families are still able to come in. And what is the population of incarcerated women in Maine presently?
Presently, we're down to 135, which is historic for me. Like I said, I've been here about 9 years, and that's the lowest I've seen it. So
what's the highest have you seen it?
Like 250.
So 135 women in the state of Maine?
Correct.
Oh, so so I think the next step would be doing reentry healing centers, maybe changing a little bit. I can't imagine even the range of time. What's the longest is anyone incarcerated for life out of that 135?
So yeah, really? So that 135 includes our reentry population. We do have a very nice, very new. So when you do come to Maine, I'll show you around. Our reentry center is a 100-bed facility. It is not full because, like I said, our population is very low. And the ranges of sentences are 9 months and a day to life. And we do have a handful of ladies doing life, not very many. The average sentence here for women is about 18 months. Give or take. So they're not here for a long time. So we do the best we can. And a lot of our focus, majority of our population though, is in our reentry center because of the length of their sentence. You can come to the reentry center if you have 5 years or less remaining on your sentence, and your minimum custody, which the majority of our females fall into that.
Okay, well, to hear 135, I remember when I was in the camp in federal prison, we had more than that at one time,
I know.
in a little building in Danbury. So to think that in the entire state, that and it has dropped, so that means that it will increasingly drop. And even in these times, how would you say that, with COVID, are the numbers still going down? Have you had any type of infection rate in the prison for women?
No, nope. Knock on wood, we have not had one female case of COVID. So I'm glad to say that. We were very proactive at the beginning of this. Everybody got masks right at the beginning, right way back in March. The women actually are making the masks. So we're making masks for the population, for not only our facility, but the other facilities, for staff, for the Department of Education. So our department's been very proactive in the PPE. The men's facilities are also making shields and gowns. So anything that we could do to help the general public. I mean, obviously that was going to help us because, our staff is out in the public, right? So if it was going to come in, it was going to come in through the staff. So we've done a lot of really, I think, good proactive steps to keep it out of our facilities. And because of that, like I said, we are actually, our reentry ladies, some of them are actually back to work in the community, and we've still been able to keep the COVID out up to this point. So that's been good. And that comes with the cooperation of the population. They understand that the hand washing and the mask wearing, although it's a pain, it's helping. So
Absolutely.
We're great. Yeah, we're grateful for those measures for sure.
Well, I am so grateful for you and for the work that you've been doing for the last decade or more, through whether it's been probation and now, Department of Corrections, and helping women and really going through a gender-informed lens on what's necessary. It's not often that I have conversations with people who work in the prisons who are so excited about, just being able to offer, that level of support. And so I know that means a lot to the women who are presently there. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate this conversation. I'm grateful for the state of Maine and for the Department of Corrections to continue to inform our sisters, my sisters, on what about the electoral process and what it is to vote and why it is important to vote. So I'm hopeful that every single one of those 135 sisters will be voting in this year's election. And so I thank you, in my hopes that you too will be voting.
Absolutely.